Hello world and welcome back to another Astral Sorcery tutorial where today we're going to be going all over rituals, collector crystals, the fake constellations and what we can finally do with them and so much more. As always, if this video helps you out in any way, shape or form, please do not forget to like and subscribe, it really helps me out, and ring the bell button as the next tutorial is going to be all about the Mantle of the Stars. So first up, when it comes to rituals, we need to say that this is done in the attunement section of the book. Now, not everything we're going to cover today is going to be just in attunement, but to begin with, this is what attunement has in store for us. Now, the first thing we're going to need is the ritual pedestal itself. Now, this can be made in the starlight crafting altar. It does not have to be made in the iridescent altar, but it requires 2 chiseled marble, 4 marble pillars, and 3 runed marble, as well as 2 gold ingots and a bucket of liquid starlight. Now this is going to give us the ritual pedestal itself. Now, as always, the ritual pedestal is also a multi-block structure, so if you go into the book, click on the next page and hover over the star, you'll see all the different items that you do need in order to create this, as well as always you can always do things by the Y level, and this is what you're creating in total. Now, I've made the ritual pedestal ahead of time. Now, you won't see these little yellow dots when you actually created yours. This is just illumination powder that I used to give us a little bit of light. But this is our ritual pedestal altar. Now, there is one more thing, one more tool that we should have before actually using the ritual pedestal, as it becomes very, very handy, and apparently we actually need it. And that in itself is an upgrade to our already made Fornax Resonator. This is the Domic Resonator. Now, this is going to use 4 of the illumination powder I was just talking of. We're going to need 4 stardust, 2 lenses, and of course our Fornax Resonator itself. This can also just be mated in the starlight crafting altar, as this is all still to do with attunement, and it's made such like this. Now, you will get a red little crystal thing on top of your resonator, but for me, as I'm spawning this in, you'll see that I've actually got 3 different modes on this, and this one's green. The Icosic isn't actually going to come with this particular craft. You will just have Fornax and Domic, so ignore Icosic for this tutorial. Now, with Fornax, obviously we know that is going to show us our starlight in clusters around when it's nighttime, but when it is Domic, what it's going to do is, once we have a ritual activated, if we right click on our ritual pedestal with this in our hands, it's going to show us the area of effect for the ritual of what it is. Now, we'll demonstrate this very shortly. Now, how many different rituals are there actually when it comes to Astral Sorcery? For us, we're going to start with just the basics, and by the basics I mean these are going to be all the bright and dim constellations. No faint constellations are going to come into this just as of yet. Now, starting with Discidia, this is going to make all hostile mobs take damage over time. Very powerful if you want to do, say, some sort of dark room or some sort of automated farm. It's very, very powerful. Moving on, we have Evorsio. Now, this is going to break solid blocks that are nearby, and it does happen rather rapidly, especially if you have a strong crystal of sorts. So definitely don't have this in your base, otherwise it will get destroyed. Next is Aevitas. Now, this is going to make all nearby mobs heal in some sort of way. They basically get regeneration slowly over time, and also plant growth can be accelerated. When I say mobs here, that also means yourself, as well as sheep or passive mobs and hostile mobs. Armara is next, and this is going to repel hostile mobs and projectiles, so i.e. arrows, ghasts, spits, or whatever you want to call it. And as well as that, all nearby entities, meaning yourself, gain resistance as well as absorption. Moving on, we have probably one of my favourites, is Vicio, and inside the ritual area of effect, you actually get a little bit of creative flight. But be careful, the moment you fly out of this area, the effect will tick down, as it's sort of a countdown timer like other effects, and it will disappear eventually, so make sure you're on the ground. Another very powerful ritual we have here is Fornax. Nearby blocks become their burnt or smelted version. Now, what that means is essentially wood will turn into charcoal, sand will turn into glass, all the different ores will turn into their ingot forms, but it just takes from any of the placed blocks. So if you have this just on the ground or in the middle of a cave or something like that, you'll just have ores being spat out of it repeatedly. So it's definitely a bit of a lag machine. Make sure you have some hoppers around to pick everything up, because it does work very fast. One of the most powerful ones, especially if you're using a bit of machinery from maybe something as old as IC2 or Mechanism here, we've got Horologium. Now, this is going to increase the tick rate of your machines, meaning they will work faster. Now, it's a little bit finicky, but I promise you it does work. We'll demonstrate this a little bit later. Next, another very powerful ritual here, we have Mineralis. Now this is going to turn stone that is nearby into ore gradually over time. Sometimes it can take a little bit of a while, but if you have just a wall of stone, so you put the ritual right next to this mountain here, eventually all the stone would turn to various ores. Now this does also include ores from other mods, say copper, tin, aluminium, things that aren't base vanilla will also turn if it's been coded into your mod pack. Something a bit more for the farmers out here, we have Octans. Nearby water basically becomes easier to fish in. Now, doing some testings with this, it seems that fish just pop out the water without even stopping, so it's a bit more than just becoming easier to fish. Fish just jump out at you. Probably one of the better rituals out there, we have Lucerna. Hostile mobs no longer spawn nearby, so it doesn't matter if it's day, night, dark, or whatever. As long as you're inside this area of effect, there is no mobs that are going to be spawned whatsoever. However, there are ways to overwrite this. Those being either using the nocturnal powders from Astral Sorcery itself, or by other means we'll demonstrate. Pelotrio entities will have a higher chance of spawning, so this is basically all about drop rates and stuff like that, or even having mobs have a higher chance of spawning. This is where also another thing where I believe Lucerna will be underridden. So if you had Lucerna figuring out an area and then you had Pelotrio right next to it, hostile mobs will then start spawning within Lucerna. I do believe that is a thing, so be very careful there. And finally, Botes. Now this is another one for the farmers out there. Nearby animals shed their drops, which means that if you have sheep or cows nearby, the wool will get dropped automatically, leather will get dropped automatically, and I even do believe that pigs will actually drop their pork, but I'm not quite too sure about that. Now, of course, the way to activate these rituals is first you're going to need a rock crystal. The rock crystal can be whatever type of rock crystal you like, just completely default. So here I have just spawned in a random rock crystal. It's got size 2, shape 3, and all you do is go over to your attunement altar, slap down any of the constellations that you want, and then throw your rock crystal into it. Now, we covered this in the last tutorial, so I highly recommend you go check that out in the cards in the top right hand corner. Then to actually activate your ritual, all you've got to do is take your rock crystal here, whatever type you wanted, and just right click it onto the pedestal, and you'll know that everything's working correctly when you get this sort of halo ring around and all these particle effects. That's when you know that what you've wanted is actually working. Now, before we actually start plugging in our ritual crystals here, there's something that we should cover first, and that is all the ritual properties or the rock crystal properties that we should have on our crystals before trying to make something on here. So basically, how do we get the most powerful ritual that we can? Starting with rock crystals, obviously we can only have up to 7 different traits on a crystal at one time. Now, I'm bringing up a table here on screen. We've seen this many times already, but what we want to mainly focus on here are ritual effect and the ritual range. So, of course, you're going to want ritual range at its most, which is only of 2, and ritual effect, which is a maximum of 3. Now, that's going to give you a 30% increase in the effect of the ritual, and also a 10% wider range, which is very, very powerful. Now, that's going to take up 5 of your slots already, so you have a choice here. You can either go for shape, which is going to give you slightly more effect, or you go for purity. Now, considering purity you can only get up to a maximum of 2, I recommend going for that, as it gives you both 40% effect and 40% range, and those are pretty much going to be the strongest crystals you can get. When it comes to celestial crystals, however, you get a little bit more, as you can have 10 different properties in total. So I would recommend myself, personally, you have the ritual range, effects and purity, just as normal, but you go for shape also as well, as that's going to give you the extra 25 total ritual effect. Now, there is one more thing you could put on here instead of any of these properties, and that is focus. If you want to focus a specific constellation, then you do get added bonus. However, focus only works when that specific constellation is in the sky on that particular night. However, if you went with shape, even though it's a little bit less, you get it constantly. So if you were saying you had a Discidia rock crystal here, focus to Discidia, you would get a 35% increase in both range and effect. However, it may only be for one night in a whole week. So it's a bit give and take. I personally like going for the permanent, which is why I go for shape. So now let's finally go into these rituals here, starting with Discidia. Now this is obviously going to be all about hurting mobs, so if we spawn into these skeletons, they start instantly getting taken out, no time at all. Next we have Evorsio, which is all about mining and taking out blocks, and out of nowhere you'll have just blocks being broken. This is underneath, all around, it just throws it all in the center, but it will not break our ritual pedestal here. Next we have here is Aevitas. Now this is going to obviously give us regeneration and all close by mobs, but as well as that, it's actually going to start ticking up our rate of growth on some of these plants here. Now, just to demonstrate the area of this is where we're going to get our Domic Resonator here. If we right click on the pedestal, we'll start seeing that we have this sort of force field thing right around here. Now it's a little bit hard to show the corners of where this exactly is, because this is actually a circle area, but it just looks a bit strange with how they've done the textures here. And as you can see, the plants are in the correct zone here. Sometimes it takes a bit of a while for the rituals actually recognize that the seeds are in the way, but these do grow faster, I promise you. After Aevitas, we obviously have Armara. Now Armara is going to be a force field here, and then if this is probably the best way to use the Domic Resonator, is that, as you can see, this is the area of effect here, and if we spawn in some skeletons, they'll instantly start getting pushed away. Now this goes the exact same for arrows. If they start shooting arrows, they get flung away. If we started shooting arrows in this section, they would also be flung away. So it's very, very powerful, this Armara. Moving on now, we have Vicio, which apparently according to the wiki is meant to give you a jump boost and a bit of a speed boost, but for whatever reason I think they've updated it and it no longer works. But for us, if we go into survival mode here, we can see that if we go inside of this area here, we can still use creative flight. But of course this is actually a flight effect that we're going to get on the corner here. So if we fly outside of the area, it won't just completely disappear. There's sort of a bit of a delay here, but you will fall back down, so you've got to be very, 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 very careful. Now next we have Fornax. Now obviously when you place this in, it's going to be very similar to Evorsio here, except it's going to start throwing out loads of glass, because obviously we're near the sand, and various different types of ores. So this is going to be everything that's under the ground inside the given area. Next up we have Mineralis. Now when you activate this, what it does is it eventually turns stone obviously into various ores. Now it may take a bit of time because it's probably going to start doing some ores that are underground here, maybe underneath the water, but eventually this stone will turn into ores over time. And there we go, not too much long later, we've got some coal ore here. So as similar to with the plant growth, it takes a bit of time for it to recognize that the stone's here, because it's only a bit of chance, but eventually all of this would turn into ore. Next we have probably one of the most OP ones in the game, and that is the Horologium one. Now for all those tech people using those tech mod packs here, we're using Mechanism here, but Horologium is going to increase the tick speed of your machines, making them work faster. But as well as that, it also can do it on your cables as well as your power supply. So that will basically increase the transfer of power through your cables. And then when it comes to things like these smelting factories here, it will do the operations quicker. So we placed all of these at the exact same time. As you see, we've got 4, we've got now 5 obviously. But over here, we've got 9. And this one we have 5. Now it does take a bit of time, as this is so powerful. Eventually it should spread to all of your different machines, as it does do multiple different machines at once, or cables. But you'll know when your ones are being done when you have this strong purple mist over your machine. So one's just started coming up on the cables here, and I think it's actually moved. Okay, that seems to be it. Instead of doing it all one at once, it spreads between the area, so it will pick one for a bit, then move on, then pick another and move on. So now it's obviously doing the cable. Next we have Octans. Now this says only it's going to make it easier to fish, but it's going to make it stupidly easy. It's going to actually just start spawning fish randomly, or rather all the different items that you can fish. See, we got here an enchantment book right over here. You can even get enchanting rods if you're really lucky, although they're generally pretty broken, and all the food you could possibly ever want. Another thing is of course Nautilus shells. Then next we have Lucerna. Now the best way to really show this off is if we look at this island over here and we change this to hard, we'll start seeing some mobs spawn on this island over here. Now if we actually put Lucerna into this and then see our area, it doesn't despawn enemies within inside the area. All it does is stop them from spawning. So if we change this to peaceful to despawn them, and then if we change it back to hard mode, no mobs will spawn in this section. They will actually start all spawning outside of it. You can see there's a couple of zombies over there and such. Next we have is Pelotrio. Now this is going to give us a higher chance of spawning things, and that includes hostile mobs. So if we place this down, we'll see that mobs from all different types of mods that are in the game, not just vanilla, will start to spawn, and it's all different types. Even endermen will start spawning directly above the water, even though they're not really meant to. Now lastly we have bow tears, which is going to make animals start shedding their drops. Now this doesn't just work with sheep, this works with pigs, chickens, cows, whatever animal that actually does drops. Now it doesn't just drop the wool, as you can see it also drops their meat. So it works very well over time, especially if you're a farmer. You just slap one of these down and you'll have food forever. Now, obviously we have this going, but is there any way of making this even more powerful? Obviously you can see our range and the effect is pretty quick, but can we make it even faster? And the answer is yes. There are 2 ways of doing it, or 3 ways nearly. The first is when you're still in an attunement and you're just using rock crystals for your rituals, not using celestial crystals like we are here. A way of actually increasing the effect of these rituals is actually by having it closer to the sky. The higher up in the sky, the more starlight the ritual pedestal can collect, meaning it's going to be more powerful. The other way, however, is going to be by making collector crystals. Now, we've been using collector crystals since the very start of this mod, but now in constellations, we can make our own. So in constellations, that obviously means we're going to be now using the celestial altar and no longer the starlight crafting altar. For us, we're going to be using the iridescent altar since we've unlocked Radiance. Now, in order to make this collector crystal, first you must have 4 illumination powder, 4 resonating gems, 4 stardust, and an attuned rock crystal to the attunement that you wish to use. Now for this we've got Discidia in here, and then when you put it all together you'll get a Discidian collector crystal. Now once you've unlocked constellations, you can do this either out of rock crystals or celestial crystals, but just for the sake of power we're going to be showing off the collector crystals made out of celestial crystals. So we've looked at the properties for all our celestial and rock crystals, but when it comes to collector crystals, we need to focus on something a little bit different. And that is, instead of looking at ritual effect and ritual range, we're now going to look at either focus, collection rate, or even size, shape, and purity. So obviously we're going to be going with celestial collector crystals here, which means we get 10 different properties. Now purity, if you look at this graph again, we're going to see that we get a 40% starlight collection when using purity 2, so we absolutely want purity 2. Next is collection rate, which will give us our 20%. Now that's also at a tier of 3, that will give us 5 in total. Then we've got, for us here, we've got shape 3, which gives us 25%. A little bit better than size, as that only gives us 20%. Now there's one more thing you could do here, which we're using over size, and that is focus. Now we spoke about focus a little bit when we were talking about our collector celestial crystals here that are attuned, but there's a very specific reason I've chosen to do focus on these instead of on these. And that is because if you want to actually boost any of these rituals, you have to use the exact same collector crystal. Now what I mean by this is that if you want to use the Vicio Celestial Crystal Ritual, you can't use, say, a Fornax Collector Crystal. You must use also a Vicio Collector Crystal. So both the Collector Crystal and your attuned crystal for the ritual need to match entirely, which is why I like to use the focus on the Collector Crystal. Now I know it's the exact same as that specific constellation has to be in the sky, but for me personally, I prefer it this way, as you get 30% when it's in the sky versus 20% all the time. So for the sake of argument here, let us place down all our little sheeps again. We'll put our constellation back in here so rituals start going, and then we'll work on our collector crystal. Now you don't want to place it inside of the ritual square, as that will completely deactivate our ritual entirely. We can, however, put it right on the edge here. Now by itself it doesn't do anything. It's not like our celestial relays over there that will automatically connect to our tables. Instead we actually have to physically link this ourselves. So if you just right click on the collector crystal there on the pedestal, we'll start seeing all these beams of light. Now these beams of light are another way of increasing how powerful this effect is. Now because we're using a celestial collector crystal, you'll see that there's 5 points coming out of this pedestal. If we were, however, using our regular rock crystals, there would only be 4 points here. So for this we're going to throw on our area here to see how things actually change and what we can do with these points. Basically, these points are the crystal basically breaking down. So what we need to do is send this light back into it in order to make it more powerful. And we do this by using lenses. Now, we've covered lenses previously in a different tutorial, but today we're going to be using it for this. Now, I'm going to be using these infused wood columns here just as a bit of decoration. And what we want to do is start placing some blocks up just to have our lenses to sit on. Now, these need to be done at the very, very tippity top of these light spikes. And obviously we have 5 as we're using our celestial rock crystals here. Now, these can be either just one block or all the way up to 3 different blocks. And you want to pay very close attention as things get very faint. Then we'll place all our lenses on the top here. Again, we should have 5 in total. And by itself, these do not do anything. We have to link each one back to our pedestal here. And remember to always deselect after changing your lens, as that allows you to select a new one. And as you can see here, our area is starting to increase. So if I now link this to here, we'll see everything pops out just a little bit more. And if I do, oh, that's it. I did exactly there what I was talking about. I linked that lens to the other. Deselect, reselect, and then if I ping this again, bosh, it pops out just that little bit more. So each lens is going to increase our effect even further and our range. It's very, very powerful. And these guys should now be dropping their drops even quicker. Now again, we can increase this further by having this high up in the sky, but there is actually one more way of making this even faster, and that is by inside of Constellation here, we can make the enhanced collector crystals. Now this can only be done with the celestial collector crystals, not the regular rock crystals, and you basically build this structure here. Now this inside this little area here, it does say in the book, but it doesn't show on the diagram, each one of these squares here in this 9 or 3x3 area, has to be a solid block of liquid starlight. And the same as usual, up here in the corner it tells you exactly what you need, and you can build it by each Y level. Now, as you can see, I've built everything right here, and what we're going to do is now move our rock crystal to not directly on top here. You actually want it one further with a bit of an air gap here, and you'll know that it's working when you have your specific constellation's color zipping around this place. Now, what you got to do is link this exactly back to over here, and that will now give us even more power with our rituals. Now, something else to note is that with these rock crystals, you don't have to just use these on the ritual pedestals. You can use this either by itself or with the entire frame on our other blocks here. So we can do it if we wanted to on our altars. Obviously, we've got the iridescent altar here, and if we were to make one of these advanced enhanced collector crystals, this would probably fill up our iridescent altar all the way to here, or even the very, very end. So it's very, very, very powerful, and I highly recommend using them. One thing to note though is that if you have multiple too close to each other, you will get diminishing returns. Now on the wiki it says that you need to be at least 14 blocks away from another one of these structures. So you want to be, let's just go for a chunk, you want to be about this distance away from each different altar to get the maximum effect out of each one. Coming back over to Tutorial Village now, there is one more thing within side Constellation that we can actually do, and this is using the ritual anchor. Say we've made our ritual pedestal and it's doing great, it's doing the effect that we want, but we don't want it there anymore. We want something a little bit closer, or just in a different location. What we can use is ritual anchors. Now these ritual anchors are very, very powerful. They require 4 golden nuggets, 1 gold ingot, 2 lenses, 1 resonating gem, 1 stardust, and any 4 cuddle lenses. We've covered these previously. Now that's obviously made in the celestial altar, doesn't have to be in the iridescent, and when you craft it you will actually get 2 ritual anchors. Now this is going to be used on our ritual pedestal over here. So if we get Botez again and push that into here, we'll see that things start working again, and you'll notice, or probably already, that there's this beam flying out the center of the pedestal. Now what we want to do is place one of these ritual anchors 5 blocks above the crystal, so essentially 6 blocks from the ground. That's how I like to know it. So if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, place 1 rock crystal, then break it all again, we can see that the light is going to shine, and at the very tippity top, that's where our ritual anchor is. Now something to note is that you do not need to have a celestial crystal or this enhancement. You don't even need the lenses in order to use these anchors. You can do it without all of this, as this is just sending things away. We're just going to be sending things in the most powerful state. So if we now go over here way outside the area, which is just about here, what we can do is take our little linking tool here, link one up. Now don't switch, otherwise you'll deselect, and then link over to here. And you'll know this is done correctly if you have the lenses up. You'll get all of these different coloured lights coming out of it as well. Now what we've done is the ritual is no longer here at all. It's not a case of, oh, we've got it here and over there. We physically move the ritual in its entirety now. These guys are not going to be dropping their drops any longer. However, over here, now inside this area, you can see all the particles are here. That's how we know it's been moved. So if we had loads of sheep over here now, these guys would eventually start dropping some of their stuff. And it should work rather quickly, as we have such a powerful setup over there with our collector crystal. And as you can see, so many of them are already dropping land. Looking back now inside the astral tome, we see that that is going to be absolutely everything for the constellation section now when it comes to rituals. However, we can go one further, and this is not going to be unlocked until we now have Radiance, as Radiance allows us to have the faint constellations in the sky. Now the faint constellations, they're going to work very, very differently to all the others. It's not as simple as getting a rock crystal or celestial crystal, slapping them in the attunement altar, and there you go, you've got 4 brand new rituals. Instead, these augment the already existing rituals. Now what do I mean by that? Well, for one, we're going to need ourselves a rock crystal. We'll just take this Discidia one here. Sorry, not this one. This one. We'll take our Discidia rock crystal right here. Now, as you can see, it's just one I got off the wall. It doesn't have the greatest specs, but it's attuned to Discidia. Now, over here in our attunement altar, you place everything down the exact same as we have discussed before with any other attunement. Here we have Alcara, which is one of the faint rituals. And what we do is we take our Discidia attuned crystal, throw it on, and it will basically start attuning it again. However, it's not going to override the attunement, it's going to add the trait of Alcara onto this crystal. So while that's going, let's discuss what these traits are. We have 4 different faint rituals, 4 different faint constellations, sorry. And let's start with Gelu. Gelu is going to basically increase the ritual's range but lower its effect. Now apparently this is by about 4 times, so it'll be 4 times larger the range but 4 times less powerful. Alteria is going to be pretty much the exact opposite of Gelu, except so what it's going to do is give you a 4 times reduced range but a 4 times increased effect. So with those sheep on the Botevs, that is going to make it uber fast, but really close together. Now Vorax is sort of the halfway point, how it doubles the size and the effect of your ritual, so not quite as powerful, but you don't get any backlash or defects. And the last one is Alcara. Now Alcara is probably the most strangest trait you could have, as what it does, it corrupts all your rituals. So you can have all the different rituals which we've just shown, but they're corrupted. And when it says they're corrupted, it essentially means the opposite is going to happen. Now if we go over here, this should be done by about now, and we look here, if we look at now our Discidia rock crystal, it says attuned to Discidia, but it's got the trait of Alcara. Now we're going to go over what each of the Alcara things are now. Going in the exact same order now as what we did previously and what is in the book, let's start with the corrupted Discidia. Now this is now, instead of going to damage mobs, it's going to damage players, and all the mobs are going to get resistance and inner wealth. The inner wealth buff seems to mean they have higher chance of dropping better stuff or more stuff. So something that could be cool is having a corrupted Discidia, which would inside some sort of spawner area. Although it would damage you, it would give you more drops, and if you had a regular Discidia, it would kill them quickly, which gives you again more drops. Next we have Evorsio. The opposite of breaking blocks is placing them, and instead of actually breaking blocks though, as it does in a huge circle, Evorsio places blocks in just a semicircle. Now it's going to place stone to begin with, and once you get a little bit of a radius out, it's going to start placing cobblestone instead. After that we have Aevitas, which is probably the worst one for the player. It gives you weakness, mining fatigue, hunger and bleeding, and that is very bad when it comes to just generally walking around and living. And the opposite of helping crops grow, it destroys them, so it essentially gives the crops as if they think that there's no water and they just pop off. After that we have Armara. Now this is going to buff mobs with both speed and attack, and as far as I'm aware it also allows them to receive less damage, so they have more defense, or essentially gives you weakness. And also if you have Armara regular with the force field on, those mobs inside the corrupted Armara are no longer going to be repelled. Then we have Vicio, which gives you mining fatigue, slowness, and also zooms your camera in really far, so it's very hard to walk around. The slowness effect, however, does also get applied to other mobs, and something to note is that when this is active, when you're standing inside the ritual area, you physically cannot move. You can spam WASD as much as you want, you cannot move. However, you can jump and move, so you can move about one block at a time, but again, it's very slow. After that, we have Fornax, which is going to be pretty similar to Evorsio as it places blocks, but we know Fornax is all about heating things up and smelting things. It's now going to freeze things, so if you're near water like we are over here, it's going to start freezing over all the ice. Next we have Mineralis. Now this is going to be a little bit similar to Evorsio, how it starts placing blocks everywhere, but it's going to be ored stuff. Now it says under your feet, but from my testing it's not actually under your feet, it just sort of happened, but it's going to start placing blocks and some of them will have ores in it. So to be honest, the corrupted Mineralis is probably a little bit better than regular Mineralis. Next we have Corrupted Horologium. Now this is going to actually freeze mobs and machines in time, and now from my testing what it shows is that if you have a skeleton shooting at you in survival mode and then they walk into Horologium, they just stop, they freeze, they don't fire arrows at you, they don't look around or anything, they just completely stop. And then the same as with machines just stop working. After that we have Octans. Now Octans is apparently meant to just spawn water everywhere in every single direction, but from what I've tested, all it does is just pretty much increase the rate that fish come out of the ground. I haven't actually had this work properly, but that is apparently what it does. After that we have Lucerna. Now it says make night longer, but it's not actually making night longer. It's going to turn back time. So at the moment we have a command on so the day or the night never actually continues, but when this corrupted Lucerna is on, you're going to see the moon start going backwards and setting in the way that it rose. After that we have Pelotrio. Now Pelotrio is actually going to turn passive mobs into hostile ones. Now what do I mean by this? It's not suddenly going to make sheep, pigs and that angry at you and start attacking you. It's physically going to change some passive mobs into negative ones. So it's going to turn chickens into blazes, cows into zombies, sheep into strays, pigs into zombie pigmen, parrots into ghasts, and villagers into witches. And one other thing is regular skeletons, even though they're not passive, those can spawn into wither skeletons. So it's a nice way of getting wither skeletons as well. Also the wither skeleton seems to get inner wealth, similar to Discidia, but +4, so it's probably a good way of getting a lot of wither skeleton skulls. And lastly we have Botez. Instead of animals shedding the skin, it just kills animals instantly, so that's also very powerful if you want to have a little bit of a cull. So back over here, I've shut off our previous Botez and I've left this here. I've already made all our Arcara different rituals here. Now the exact same as with these, you can get Arcara traded collector crystals, but I haven't been bothered to actually make them all, but just let you know, it is exactly a thing. You can make the exact same structure, you can do all the exact same things, except it gives you the Arcara. So if you're using a Botez Arcara ritual, you're going to need the Botez Arcara collector crystal. Still needs to match. So let's now start here. We've got all the different Arcara inverted corrupted rituals here, and let's start with Discidia. Now this is apparently going to damage us if we turn into survival mode. It should now damage us, but for whatever reason it's not actually. And if we start placing these mobs in here, as you can see, they have some particle effects on them, so they definitely know that they have resistance and inner wealth. Next we have Evorsio, which is obviously going to be placing a load of blocks. Now this is going to be placing them all underneath this platform here, so we should start seeing underneath here blocks starting to be placed. Now it can take a little bit of time, but it does actually place them eventually. There we go, I've broken some of the grass blocks here, and as you can see it's starting to place stone in the place of these grass blocks over time. Next we have Aevitas, which is probably the worst one. The moment we put this in, you can see that we have got all these terrible things, and if we go into survival mode, you can see things get very bad very quickly. And it is meant to zoom us in, but for whatever reason it isn't doing it. Afterwards we have Armara. So when we place this in, you'll see that these guys start getting their effect. They get all their buffs, they have better speed and better attacks, and then also they obviously won't get repelled. Then we have Vicio, where this is the one that zooms us in, sorry, not Aevitas. Vicio zooms us in, as you can see, and I am pressing WASD here and I am not moving. However, I can jump and move, but as you can see, it's very, very, very slow. I can fly, of course, because I'm in creative. After that, we have Fornax, which instead of heating things up, it's going to start freezing everything. So all these water sources, as you can see, they're going to start randomly freezing up, and that's about all it does. It just freezes water, so it could be good for a bit of an ice farm. Next we have Mineralis. Now when we place Mineralis, everything starts getting placed. Loads and loads of blocks. It's even faster, it's a heck of a lot faster than Evorsio, and it actually gives us odd ones as well. So you definitely want to have this as some sort of farm, as it is incredibly fast, and this is without even having some sort of augment on with an extra collector crystal. After that we have Horologium. Now this is going to stop time for enemies, but we're not going to be showing it when it comes to actually the machines this time. But if you can see, we have got these guys over here. They are moving around, they are doing those other things. If we go into survival here, they're going to start shooting at me, and it's going to be scary. But we put down Horologium, they just stop. They just freeze, and the machines also freeze. We take it out and they're going to start attacking me again. There's a little bit of a cooldown because the buff needs to be taken away from them, but eventually they're going to start attacking me again, and then we can freeze them. Next we have Octans. Now Octans is apparently going to start placing water everywhere, but for whatever reason I can't get this to work. I don't know if it's because I'm around water, it might start placing blocks in this area, but for whatever reason for me it just doesn't seem to do anything. If anyone actually knows how Octans work, please let me know in the comments. Next we have Lucerna. Now this is one of the coolest ones. So you can see we have the moon. It's not doing anything, it's just looking pretty. We place Lucerna in here and it starts going backwards. Now I'm not moving the mouse there, you can see that the ticks are actually being ticked back. So if you wanted to make it perma night, what you could do is have some sort of thing to suck this off, then day would start progressing forward again, and then put it back on and night would start reversing. And some way of getting some sort of permanent night with some sort of redstone contraption. So now we have Pelotrio. Now this is going to change mobs from one thing into the other. So just as an example here, we're going to start placing these down. Let's actually get out of peaceful mode here. And these guys are going to start changing into their counterparts, and skeletons are going to turn straight away into withered. And they have withered with bows, which is very, very dangerous. There we go, we got a zombie, we got a pigman, chicken into blaze, which is a very strange match, and sheep should turn into strays. And lastly, here we have Botez. We have this last guy that just didn't want to turn into a stray, so he's just gonna die instantly. Without a shadow of a doubt, Botez is gruesome. And that, unfortunately, is everything I can show about rituals. If this video helped you out in any way, shape or form, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps me out, guys. And ring that bell button, as we are going to be covering all over the Mantle of the Stars in the next tutorial. And if you haven't already, join the Discord. I will leave a link down to that in the description. We are a growing community and we're nearly up to 60 members now, which is absolutely insane. Thank you so much for stopping by, everyone, and until next time, take care.